And Lewis, I'd like to start by asking you to explain something to us that's in the Conservative manifesto and has caused a certain amount of consternation and comment. It's a little paragraph about the Constitution, because Brexit is supposed to usher in a new era for this country. And it says, after Brexit, we also need to look at the broader aspects of our Constitution, the relationship between government, Parliament, and the courts. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's exactly what it says. First of all, I'll be very clear. The independence of the judiciary is sacrosanct. We're absolutely passionately
think that this is a coded way of saying we're coming after the Supreme Court. They cause us a lot of embarrassment over the proroguing of Parliament, and we're coming for them.
No, as I say, the Prime Minister, the Lord Chancellor, and I'll say now, have all been very clear, I think, that the independence of the judiciary is sacrosanct. We may disagree sometimes what they say with respect, but they are entitled to that independence. Okay. And part of our democracy, I think, relies on keeping the independence of the entire judiciary.
So if everything is going to stay the same, why say that you're going to change things?
Well, I think it is right that we actually, from time to time, do look at the structure within which we work. So, for example, as the Prime Minister outlined on this show last week, with one of the things that Parliament does do is it legislates around the sentencing. That's one of the things that Parliament can do. The judiciary implement it and interpret it, but it is for Parliament to legislate.
So you're not looking at a change in the relationship, really, between Parliament, government and judiciary?
Judiciary's independence is sacrosanct.
All right, let's turn to something else which caused a lot of comment. Are there going to be checks on goods going from Northern Ireland to Great Britain?
No, I mean, look, first of all, let me be clear. We have some checks now with customs and live animals, things like that. It's right that we continue that. But we've been very clear. There'll be no border down the Irish Sea. The whole of the UK, as a whole, will leave the European Union together. And of course, Northern Ireland itself will have that self-determination around things as we go forward.
So why did the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, tell Parliament the exit summary declarations will be required?
Well, as I say, there are
Was he right about that?
Well, yes, he is, and the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister's right as well. There are already some checks. If goods are leaving the United Kingdom, there are some checks now, but we are not going to have a border down the Irish Sea.
I'm going to stop you there. How can they both be right? One's saying there will be no checks, one's saying yes, there will be checks. They can't both be right.
Because there's a difference between whether there are checks between goods trading between Northern Ireland and Great Britain and goods leaving Great Britain and the UK. That is quite a different thing. We're not going to have any difference between the Northern Ireland and Great Britain.
There will be form filling. The Prime Minister agreed that in Annex 2 of his withdrawal agreement, there are 300 different regulations and directives from the EU that will apply to Northern Ireland, but not to the rest of the UK. How is it possible for all those regulations to apply without there being more bureaucracy and more form filling?
Well, two things. I think, first of all, as the Prime Minister also said, of course, Northern Ireland will be self-determined. They will have the ability to say yes or no to these things in Northern Ireland themselves. But also, as I say, there are some checks now of goods leaving the UK to go into Europe. It may well be, it depends on what we negotiate with the EU, and goods coming from the EU in, of course, will be coming through, and therefore will need to be checked, such as live animals. And it's quite right, I think, that we crack down on that kind of abhorrent trade.
If you're in business in Northern Ireland, you're very confused, because the Prime Minister says just throw those regulations in the bin, throw them away. The Brexit Secretary says no, these are summary declarations, they need to be filled in. And the leaked document from your government shows that Stephen Barclay is right, and the Prime Minister is therefore wrong. It says the customs declaration checks will be highly disruptive to the Northern Ireland economy. 98% of the exporters involved are small businesses, and your own document says they are likely to struggle to bear the cost of it, and that high street goods in Northern Ireland are likely to increase in price. You are separating Northern Ireland from Great Britain.
No, we're not. And actually, I'll go further, Andrew. I've been over in Northern Ireland myself, talking to business representatives, business people like the Federation of Small Business, Chamber of Commerce, IOD. They support this deal because actually it does mean that Northern Ireland and Great Britain leaves the European Union, the customs union, together as one whole part.
Again, I quote just once more from this leaked document. Very interesting. He says the withdrawal agreement, your government says, has the potential to separate Northern Ireland in practice from whole swathes of the UK's internal market. That's exactly what infuriates the DUP. You have done something you said you wouldn't do. You have cut the two areas off.
No, we're not. And we're very clear about the fact that we've got the implementation period this year, and we are very clear that when we leave the European Union, which we will do after the implementation period, assuming we get a Conservative government, of course it needs a Conservative government to get Brexit done by the end of January, at the end of the implementation period, the United Kingdom will leave the EU as a whole together.
doesn't sound to me like getting Brexit done if you're going to separate the two. But anyway, let's move on.
But Andrew, we're not. I disagree with you on that.
Okay, well, let's move on to something specific, which is fishing. Now, there's a very interesting report in a Conservative supporting newspaper, The Telegraph. I've been talking to people in Brussels, and they said, EU sources there said their plan is to make EU access to British waters a condition for any trade deal and to make the demand public on, or as close as possible, to February the 1st if Boris Johnson wins. That will be the day that reality hits home, said an EU source. What are you going to do about that?
Well, that's obviously what they are saying will be their negotiating position. Ours has been very clear from the beginning. And let's be frank, this is a European Union that said they wouldn't reopen the withdrawal agreement. Boris Johnson got them to do that and got a new withdrawal agreement in under 90 days.
So doing this Northern Ireland thing we talked about.
Yeah, but that means the UK leaving the EU together. And we've always said we want to ensure we get back control of our fishing. We're an island nation, and getting control of our fishing rights is part of where we want to be.
But the more we decide to diverge, the harder these negotiations are going to be. We only have 11 months. Can I ask you about another area, really, really important to this country's economy, which is the city? Now, the city would not be part of any free trade agreement because that's a treatment in goods. And yet the city needs lots and lots of specific agreements to carry on doing trading as they are now in the rest of the EU. Are all those agreements going to be negotiated by the British government in those 11 months?
Yes, as I say, we're clear. We
all
want to
of the
leave.
cities ones.
Yeah, because one of the difference between the UK and the negotiation we're doing, and countries around the world that have negotiated with the EU, is we're already a known entity. We are a trading partner, so we are stepping away and stripping some things out that don't work for us, like free movement, and we've announcing our immigration rules today. But actually, therefore, it makes it much easier for us to do a deal than many other people have ever experienced before. We're in a unique position.
So this is really interesting. So alongside the free trade agreement that you're going to negotiate, there's going to be other agreements you're going to negotiate simultaneously, including for access for the city to the EU.
I have absolute confidence that our city will continue to be the centre of the world in many parts for financial services. And it has got.
And this is all going to be done by June. It's all going to be done by June. I don't think you can point to any trade expert outside the UK who thinks this is possible.
But there's also, you could have gone back a few months and nobody said that Boris Johnson would open the withdrawal agreement. And he did, and he got a deal agreed in under 90 days. So I think we can do this.
But we disagree about that. We disagree about that. But let's look at the other thing that he said was be essential to this negotiation, which is what he called lubrication, which is the money. We have already agreed to pay all the money over anyway, so that lubrication has gone. In short, we are going to be in a very weak position in a much, much harder negotiation as soon as this election is over.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think if you look at the way that we trade with the EU, we are important partners. That means we are important to them, the same as the European Union is an important trading partner for us. And it is ultimately in both our interests to come to a free trade agreement that works for the economies of both the UK and our partners and friends across Europe.
Now, you are former chairman of the party. The Prime Minister is making a lot today of a potentially leaked document, or certainly a leaked document the Labour Party had about the NHS, which may well have come from Russian sources originally. And this whole question of Russian involvement in the election, now the Conservative Party is worried about it. Lots of other people have been worried about Conservative involvement. How can we make a judgment about what's really going on if the Conservative Party hides the report, hides the information that was uncovered by a parliamentary committee all the way through this election campaign?
Well, let's be very clear. We haven't done that. Look, first of all, there's a national security document. Yeah. It's a large document. It's come back to the government. The government has to go through that. It's quite right.
Your security minister, can I ask, have you read it?
I have read it, yes.
What does it say? Give us a headline. Give us a headline at least.
You'll appreciate, Andrew, as the security minister, on a document with national security issues in it, I'm not going to comment on what's in the document until it's published, and it will be published. Okay. And let's also let me dispel a bit of the myth about this.
Let me ask you a really
this
important
document is still within the normal time frame for a document of this type to be published by a government. After the general election, we can't publish it now because of PERDA, but after the election it will be published.
Dominic Grieve, who's chairman of the committee involved, disagrees with that. But can I ask you directly, is there any evidence in this document of Russian involvement in our election campaigns?
I'm not going to comment on the details that's in the document. I'm not saying there might be, I'm not saying there won't be, I'm not saying there is or there isn't. I'm saying I cannot comment, and it would be inappropriate to comment on a national security document. But it will be published after the general election.
Security Minister and Justice Minister, can I ask you...
I'm not Justice Minister.
Sorry. Okay, Security Minister, I beg your pardon. And you were party chairman. Can I ask you, therefore, do you know, has there been Russian money funding the Conservative Party in this campaign?
No, the funding for the Conservative Party comes from people who are declared through the Electoral Commission and are British citizens. And it is quite right that anybody who's a British citizen has the right to play their part in our country's politics and to donate to a political party if they want to.
All right, Brandon Lewis, for now, thanks very much indeed for talking.